Hello, everyone. I am David Skidmore from Third Coast Percussion, here with my colleagues Sean Connors, Peter Martin, and Robert Dillon. We're here as part of Keeping the Beat, hosted by UT Martin and the Tennessee Music Educators Association. We're so excited to be here tonight. We're going to talk a lot about our ensemble, answer a lot of questions, but we wanted to start off by performing a piece. This is a piece I wrote called Torched and Wrecked. All right. Thanks so much again for joining us. We are Third Coast Percussion. My name is David, and this is Rob, Sean, and Peter. We're so excited to be here with you all this evening and to talk about our group, to talk about music, and to answer hopefully a bunch of questions from you all. If you have questions at any time, please just type them in the comments on whatever platform you're watching on. So just to start things off, we wanted to talk a little bit about where we're at today and how we're being safe, because we just feel like it's an important way to start all the live streaming events that we are doing. So there's 5 people in this room tonight, the 4 members of the ensemble, plus our studio manager, Colin, who is running all the microphones and cameras for us. And the 5 of us have been self-isolating. So the 5 of us have only seen each other and our families and the loved ones that we live with for the past 22 days. We haven't left our homes since the stay-at-home order was given by our governor on March 21st was when that began. And we're just saying all of that up front to let you all know how seriously we're taking social distancing. And because it really is saving lives. So thanks to all of you for playing your part in that, and we're doing our best as well. So to start off the program, we wanted to talk a little bit about who Third Coast Percussion is. We are a full-time, usually touring percussion quartet. So we typically travel about 150 days a year. And that is to play concerts, to give educational presentations, whether they're young audiences performances or master classes, or presentations not so different than the one we're going to do tonight, where we talk about our group and how we got started and how we've made a career in music. The group has been around for about 15 years. We'll talk more about the history later. We are a not-for-profit organization, which is a very typical structure for a lot of classical music organizations or museums. So every orchestra that I know of, every museum, many other cultural organizations are not-for-profits. And that's just a way that you set up your business. That means that you can accept charitable donations. And it's basically it means that you're a mission-based group rather than a profit-based group. Doesn't mean we don't make money. We do make money most of the time, unless there's a COVID pandemic. But we don't live or die by the people who are investing in our company. We live or die by the mission that we have, and the mission that we have is to create great new percussion music and to bring it to the world. So I think that's probably enough of an intro.
Yeah.
And maybe we can just jump right into the Q&A.
Yeah. I think, we've got a little video we can show about just how the group got started. We've been around for 15 years now, but I think probably what a lot of you are interested in is sort of how things began and how we sort of got towards being where we are now. So we've got a little video we made about that. We'll kick to that, and then I'll maybe answer some questions right when we come back from that. Thanks.
TCP.
Can you say F?
A.
Q.
Third Coast Percussion started in 2005. The 4 of us in Third Coast Percussion met while studying at Northwestern University with an amazing percussionist and teacher named Michael Burrett. As part of his teaching, Mike had us play a bunch of percussion ensemble music, and so we fell in love with that music while we were still students. In 2005, we were wrapping up or starting to wrap our studies, and Rob and I played in the Civic Orchestra of Chicago, which is the Chicago Symphony Orchestra's training orchestra. And through Civic, we had opportunities to play chamber music concerts and educational concerts in a chamber music setting. And it was out of those two things, Civic Orchestra and Northwestern University, that Third Coast Percussion was born.
Fun fact, the percussion quartet that David and I played in while we were members of the Civic Orchestra of Chicago also included two other Northwestern percussion students, Anthony Calabrese, who is now a performer and music educator based in upstate New York, and Jacob Nisley, who is now the principal percussionist of the San Francisco Symphony. Jake and Anthony moved on to do other things at the end of that year in Civic. That is when Peter Martin and longtime ensemble member Clay Condon joined the group.
We played our first few concerts pretty much anywhere that would have us. We got a couple venues that we were able to play in for free, like we didn't have to rent the hall. We quickly learned that when you're in a group like Third Coast, not only is it important to play great, but you also have to know how to run the business. We didn't do a good job of telling anyone we were playing concerts, so nobody showed up. And we showed up to play these concerts with repertoire that called for 4 or 5 octave marimbas. And so we spent hours and hours and hours setting up, breaking our backs to get the instruments in place, and then played a short concert for nobody. Through those experiences, we really started to kind of cut our teeth and learn how to make not only great music, but also a successful organization.
One of the first Third Coast Percussion concerts was attended by a friend, Telbert Williams. Telbert had a background in percussion as well, but was beginning a very successful career in marketing. And he volunteered to help us out if we needed a hand marketing ourselves and just figuring out how to start presenting ourselves to the world. So Telbert led us through the process of getting our first press photos, getting our first press kit made, making our initial recordings, and first website. Soon after that, when Third Coast Percussion Incorporated, we needed to form our first board of directors, and Telbert was one of the 3 friends that we asked to become part of our first board. He's been on the board ever since. That first board also included Samir Mayakar and Reba Caffarelli. Reba has recently rejoined Third Coast Percussion's team as our managing director in 2019.
Our first couple of concerts that we were hired to do, we were hired primarily by friends, people who were slightly older than us, who had gotten their first percussion teaching jobs and had us in to give a master class and play a concert for the percussion students. By doing these first few concerts, we learned how to play together, and we took photographs together, and so we had press materials that we could share with other people who hire people to play concerts. And very, very slowly, as the years went by, we started to get a reputation for the concerts that we were putting on and for the teaching that we were doing. While Third Coast was growing at this point, the 4 of us all made some money in Third Coast Percussion, but we also had part-time jobs doing other things. So all of us taught, and gradually Third Coast got busier and busier, and our lives got more and more crazy as we were trying to fit everything in, until 2013, when our schedules got busy enough that we had to decide we had to either do less Third Coast Percussion and keep our other jobs, or quit all of our other jobs and do Third Coast Percussion full-time. And so we decided to do Third Coast Percussion full-time. We had just become the ensemble residents at the University of Notre Dame, which helped us make this transition. It gave us a little bit of a solid footing financially to quit all these other opportunities and career paths that we were on. And we quickly found that by focusing all of our energy on Third Coast, it really started to take off. All of a sudden, other opportunities started to come up, more performance opportunities, more opportunities to work with composers we had always admired or guest artists that we had always wanted to work with. We recorded an album of Steve Reich's music in 2016, and that album won a Grammy in 2017, which was a major milestone for us. And I remember standing on that stage and looking at these 3 friends and thinking that it was pretty crazy that we had built this thing from nothing. When Third Coast became a full-time job in 2013, it was just the four of us doing all the performing, all the rehearsing, and all the administrative work. But pretty quickly, things were growing to the point where we needed to hire some staff. So we started small. We hired one person part-time, and that was Liz Pesnell. She was amazing and super overqualified for the job we hired her for. So we were able to, thankfully, expand her position to full-time. She stayed with us for 5 years. And then over the years, we've added more positions. So now we have 3 full-time non-performing staff members and the 4 full-time ensemble members. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. If you're just joining us, we are Third Coast Percussion here on Keeping the Beat, hosted by UT Martin and the Tennessee Music Educators Association. And we're going to start taking some of your questions. Thanks for all the great questions that are coming in. First question, Edward F. asks, have you guys been practicing together digitally online prior to this event? And then he says something really nice about us, because we haven't been.
Yeah, basically, it's the technology, probably a lot of you have been having classes or meetings or things over Zoom or FaceTime, whatever. Technology is super helpful, but of course there's always a little bit of a delay between what a person somewhere else is saying and what you're hearing, which works fine in most cases for conversation or conveying information. But to play together and connect rhythmically, it isn't really feasible. So fortunately, Torch and Wreck, the piece we played tonight, is something we've played many, many times over the last couple years. So we just came in tonight and maybe each warmed up our hands a little bit and then just played it down. So thank you for the nice words, Edward. But it is challenging. It's not like in this time that we can build a new project and play a new piece together. At this point, we can sort of fall back on the repertoire that we've played a lot in the past and are comfortable with. Mary asks, can you talk about how you assign the parts to the musicians? Do you have preferences or particular skills on the various instruments?
In general, we don't have preferences. We like playing everything. I think for all of us, I think I can speak for all of us, that we love the variety of percussion. We talk about that a lot. So it's fun that you might play marimba on one piece and drum set on the next piece, vibraphone on the next piece, and maybe a table full of tin cans or other found objects on the next piece. So because we don't have like an instrument that one of us is particularly fond of or better at than someone else, we usually assign our parts alphabetically. So my name that starts with an S is the last in the alphabet, so I almost always play percussion 4. Rob always plays percussion 2 as a Dylan, and so forth. So that's the kind of uninteresting way that we assign parts. Every now and then we'll play either a new piece will be written for us, or we'll pick a piece of existing repertoire, and someone will say, oh, I'd like to play vibraphone this time, or I know that part of this piece and I have always wanted to play it. And we're always very cool about that, I think. Thanks for that question, Mary. This is super fun. Jalen from Indiana. Hi, Jalen. Asks, Jalen, if it's the Jalen that we think it is an amazing producer and composer who wrote us a piece that we have played one time. We premiered it in Washington, D.C., our last real touring concert before all of our other concerts were canceled. But if you don't know Jalen's music, check her out. She's amazing. And she asked, where did the name Third Coast Percussion come from? And I guess...
maybe you feel this one day.
Okay, so technically it came from my ex-girlfriend. But what we love about the name is it's a reference to our city. If you think first coast is the East Coast, second coast is the West Coast, or maybe vice versa, I don't know. But people do refer to the Great Lakes as the Third Coast. And so it's an homage to Chicago and the Midwest. which is an identity that we all hold really near and dear to us. But I've always personally thought that there was something cool about the title and the idea of a coast being the sort of beginning of something, the beginning of the water, the beginning of the land, and there's just something about that image that is a little bit abstract, but I've always thought was cool and fun and makes sense with our group.
Yeah, and I think, the coasts are generally seen not just as areas that are like land on the water, but also, the sort of are often viewed as the centers of culture in America in a lot of ways. And we feel like Chicago and the Midwest are their own sort of hub for art and music. We're not the only Third Coast thing in Chicago or in the Great Lakes area. There's a great audio festival. There's a cafe. There's a surf shop. There's a beer, Third Coast beer. So there's a lot of Third Coast things, but we sort of got on that bandwagon, I'd say relatively early, 2005. So, yeah.
Should I ask you one now?
Sure, ask me one.
Thanks for that question, Jalen. We'll see you again soon. Chelsea asks, how did we get to the point where we were able to hire staff to assist our organization?
Yeah, so 2013 is the point where the four of us went full-time after 8 years of Third Coast being around, and it's been sort of a gradual build-up to get to that point where we could all make something resembling a full-time salary from Third Coast. And it was a couple more years after that we made that first staff hire. And it was a combination of factors. All these things were. I mean, I think when we went full-time, that meant all of a sudden we were investing all of our energy into making Third Coast bigger and better, into booking more concerts, into finding more fundraising opportunities, into building new artistic projects and connecting with more people and finding more ways to get out there. And I think that then sort of kept fueling the fire and helped take things up to the next level. And it was, at that point, it was not just that we were able to make our first half hire, but we really kind of needed to. I mean, I think our schedules had sort of expanded to the point where there weren't enough hours in the day, and there were plenty of things that still needed to get done that we just wanted to make sure got addressed. So we were very fortunate that happened, and every time we add a new member to our team, they get very busy very quickly, but it helps the organization to do bigger and better and more exciting things.
And I'll just add that there's a funny thing that happens, and I think that anyone can relate to this on some level. Every time we hired someone new, there was a conversation. And the conversation was, I'm going to oversimplify it, but it was basically like, should we pay ourselves more money or should we pay someone else to help us out? It's an oversimplification, but that's basically the question that you ask yourself. And, one way or the other, we sort of ask ourselves that every day. Am I going to cook my dinner tonight, or am I going to pay someone to cook my dinner for me? And at the heart of it, the decision is the same. And for us, we've always wanted to be able to focus more of our energy on the art. Obviously, rehearsing and performing music, writing music, we all compose as well. And so each time we're hiring a staff member, it helps the organization grow and our projects can become more ambitious, but it also allows us to spend more time focusing on the music. So
maybe this is a good moment also we could just talk for a second about what we were all doing professionally before Third Coast became our full-time job, and before we sort of made that switch and that choice to be able to invest all of our time and energy into this ensemble.
Yeah, do you want me to go first?
Sure, go for it, Dave.
So, so I'll sort of talk about, let's see, how long should I talk for, like an hour about this?
Yeah,
or,
right.
Okay. Just kidding. I graduated from undergrad in 2005, and I auditioned for a bunch of grad schools, and I didn't get into any of them, which was scary for me, but a really good wake up call for me. I wasn't practicing enough, so I took a year after undergrad before grad school started, where I just gigged and taught private lessons. So I was fortunate that someone was leaving a studio with 30 students. I took over their studio, which 30 private students was enough money for me to be able to pay my rent. I invested in some instruments because all of a sudden I was out of school and I didn't, have the school's instruments to practice on. And I just practiced my butt off all year and got into grad school the next year. But essentially, my career, and I think on some level this is similar for the other guys, although there's different details for all of us. But I was a freelancer, and Third Coast was one of the freelance things that I did. It was just the one that we started together. But at first, I made no money doing Third Coast. I made all my money teaching and doing gigs. I remember the first Christmas I was out of college. I emailed every orchestra that I felt was reasonably close to drive to and asked if they needed an extra percussionist for their Christmas concert, because Christmas Pops concert, obviously you're going to need a bunch of extra percussionists. So I did all that kind of stuff. I hustled a ton for gigs. Did the same thing all the way through grad school. And then gradually Third Coast got busier and busier, as Rob was saying, and then became full-time. I also taught, I was an adjunct faculty at the Peabody Conservatory for 4 years in the years just before Third Coast became full-time.
Yeah, so after I finished graduate school at NEC, I moved back to Chicago to play in the Civic Orchestra of Chicago here, and while I was doing that, started picking up private teaching, private lessons, sort of just at some middle schools in the area and in the suburbs, and then some high schools in the suburbs, and eventually I had like some more official positions teaching at a great community music school in Chicago called Merit School of Music, and as well as teaching part-time at Loyola University here in Chicago. And while all that was going on, I was also freelance gigging, primarily orchestral gigs and some like contemporary music items as well. So I was on the orchestral track a bit more when I came out of grad school. I was taking orchestra auditions, kind of every audition that I could, for probably 5 or 6 years. I was taking a lot of auditions. I was starting to advance in auditions, so I felt like that was one career path I could continue pursuing if I wanted to. But I was also playing in some regional orchestras, driving around the Midwest, everywhere from Madison, Wisconsin to Fort Wayne, Indiana, a bunch of places around the Chicago area, and got to sub with Chicago Symphony a couple of times. So I was sort of simultaneously building that orchestral track, the teaching track, and Third Coast was growing. And as things got busier with Third Coast, I started prioritizing what were the things that were the most important to me, and sort of decided that being part of this quartet and turning this into a career was the number one thing I wanted, even though I also really liked playing in orchestra and teaching. I'm turning over to Peter. Peter's jumping on the microphone now. We're sort of rotating around a little bit to share a couple of microphones and maintaining our social distance. So I'll kick it over to Peter now, and I'll make a room for Sean to take my seat.
Hi, everyone. I'm Peter, and this is a really great opportunity to spend the evening with you all and talk about a little bit more of our history and our backstory. So the question is what did we do before Third Coast? And I think my answer has a lot of similarities to my other bandmates. I did a lot of things, and as a musician you do no matter who you are, whether you are training to be a teacher, whether you're training to be a performer, the reality is that you always do a mix of both things, and all of our situations are sort of similar in that regards. But for me, I also have many degrees in percussion. We are all highly educated drummers, I would say. I got my undergraduate degree. I did go directly into a graduate degree after my undergraduate. I did my undergraduate at Rutgers University in New Jersey, and then did my master's at Northwestern University, which is in the Chicagoland area, which is where we all met as an ensemble. So when I got done with my graduate work, I did take some time off and moved back to the East Coast, to the New Jersey, New York area, and did a lot of freelancing, a lot of freelance teaching, a lot of freelance gigging, really just doing whatever I could, to make the money I needed to make to live. And then after a little while of doing that, I decided that I did really enjoy teaching, and actually was interested in a career in teaching in higher education, so teaching in academia. And that led me to wanting to go to pursue a doctoral degree, or a terminal degree. in percussion performance, which led me back to Northwestern University. And so I did do all of my coursework for my doctorate at Northwestern University. When I got done with my doctorate, I was still in the Chicago area, living in Chicago, and much like what Dave was saying, much like what Rob was saying, I was really just doing anything and everything as a performer and as a freelance musician. So definitely doing a lot of teaching, and my teaching really varied all the way from what you would probably anticipate, from teaching in a high school to high school percussionist and teaching sort of the standard literature. But actually, a lot of my teaching was teaching, private drum set lessons where I was just teaching rock and roll. And in many cases, I wasn't even teaching with a set curriculum where I was teaching students how to read music. They weren't part of like a band program in their school. It was a lot of middle school students wanting to play Blink-182 songs, and I was happy to oblige them. I think at that time in my life, it was actually really nice because I did realize that there was this very huge spectrum of possibilities that you could have as an educator. While I was training to teach at some of the highest levels in higher education, I was actually teaching very beginning musicians who were doing it just for a hobby, not to do it professionally. And I think that was an important learning moment for me. And then, so I did that for a while, and I did every type of gig you could ever possibly imagine. I played, with orchestras. I've played club dates with bands. I've played different types of bands, different genres of music. Moonlighted as a marimba soloist for a while. Played in a couple percussion ensembles before started even this one, Third Coast Percussion. So I was always interested in chamber music, particularly contemporary chamber music. A couple years of freelancing in Chicago and interviewing for a couple jobs, and I was offered a position, a full-time tenure-track position, and I took it, and that was at Virginia Commonwealth University, which is in Richmond, Virginia. And so I was assistant professor of percussion, tenure-track position, full-time professor at Virginia Commonwealth University of VCU from 2009 to 2013, and that was an amazing experience. Really, really loved my job. The only reason I left my job there was for Third Coast Percussion, and because we had the opportunity to do this full-time, which, gigs in higher education are few and far between. That's very true, but there are no professional percussion groups out there auditioning or listing positions available in the roster. So it was an opportunity, and I took it. And I'll turn it over to Sean now.
My experience is very similar to the other three guys. Like Peter, right before I joined Third Coast Percussion, I was teaching full-time at a university, at the University of Wisconsin Stevens Point. And the only reason why I ever would have left that job would be to join a group like this. I guess the one different thing in my experience was that as an undergrad, besides having a performance major, I also got a music ed degree. So I did the student teaching thing, and I taught 3rd through 8th grade general music for 2 years after grad school. And I loved it. I absolutely loved teaching. Still love teaching. I went back to work on a doctorate because I realized that I loved teaching specifically percussion at an advanced level. But the years teaching recorder and ukulele and me singing, which no one on the stream wants to hear right now, they were formative for me. And all of us in Third Coast really love teaching a lot, and it's education is part of the mission statement of Third Coast. So that was a big one. And then all of us, I think, probably had the experience of being asked to do something that we were confident that we could figure out how to do and do well enough for what is being asked of us, but we didn't maybe right when we were being asked it consider ourselves a complete expert at it. So, for example, I sort of know how to play steel pan, and for a summer, I made rent by playing steel pan outside of bagel stores in Chicago that were changing their menu to a Caribbean-themed menu for the summer, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. People like jerk chicken sandwiches on a bagel, and they like to hear pan music, apparently, when they're eating that. That story is just to illustrate, though, that there is no way I would have known that me practicing pan would pay off in that way. But we say a lot, be open-minded and make sure that you're keeping your eyes and your ears open. Never close the door because you don't know where opportunities are going to lead you. I think it's time to answer some more questions, which is great. Before we do that, I just want to say that this is awesome. The whole team at UT Martin, TNMEA, the Country Music Association Foundation, it is so incredible that this series is going on and that you created it so quickly during a crisis. And you guys can tune in every night. Monday through Thursday night at 8 p.m. and hear different guests every single night. And that's fantastic. I've already listened to a few. I'm going to keep watching. And we're loving being on. So thank you so much for having us. Peter, do you have a question?
Yeah, actually, your discussion, Sean's discussion about his experience teaching in a K through 12 situation reminded me of one question that I saw on the list here. This is from Drew D., who asks, what are some things happening in school music programs across the country, so I'm assuming K through 12 music programs across the country, that are exciting? And what are some misconceptions that music teachers have about percussion?
Oh, yeah. That's a really great question. We could probably spend the rest of our session talking about that. If you stick with us at 9:25, we're going to air a video that is about a really special program that we're lucky enough to be a part of. That's based in Elkhart, Indiana, but we're trying to expand throughout the country. The programs that we have encountered, we're lucky enough when it's possible to be with other people to tour and see lots of different programs around the country. And the thing that really stands out, to me at least, but to all of us, is when an educator has clearly addressed a need within the population that they're teaching and just thrown themselves into it 100%. So, for example, we were just out in Sonoma, California, and there's an incredible marimba band out there that was created by a music educator who created a small nonprofit organization to fulfill the need of this community that didn't have arts education in the school district. So he saw a need and filled it. One thing that we like for Third Coast in particular is opportunities for students to create early on in their music education. So this is a little bit of my soapbox, but I think the guys will back me up on this. There's a lot of music education in our country that is focused on a skill set or being able to decode something. Like if most people, when they're taught their instrument, they learn how to play certain notes on their instrument, but they're not necessarily, in all circumstances, taught how to compose on their instrument or how to improvise on their instrument. And the programs that we think are really exciting and are really hip do those things. So they empower their students to do something creative, write a song, of a small, short composition. It could be 20 seconds long, but that's how we learn how to read and write, and we feel like we should be able to do that with the arts too in music. So there's too many examples to go into specifics here, but I think the programs that get us really excited are ones that allow their students to do that. It's a long answer. Sorry.
No, that's great. It's a really important question. Let's see. The next question we have here is Chelsea asks, does Third Coast own your collection of instruments? Are they personal or do they belong to the ensemble? I'll maybe start off that answer because it's actually I guess it's not that interesting. I mean, it is and it isn't. There's sort of two answers. Like, so some of the instruments we do own personally, and some of them are owned by Third Coast Percussion. As we mentioned a little bit in the beginning. All of us were freelance musicians and doing a variety of other things. So all of us did have a collection of our own personal instruments, and some of them were really big instruments. And actually, even some of the instruments that we were playing for you just a few minutes ago are personal instruments. But I would say for the past, close to 7 or 8 years, if not more, Third Coast Percussion, the organization, has been purchasing all of the instruments. So while we still do use some personal instruments, because there's no reason for Third Coast to have to buy another marimba if one of us personally, owns it, and actually all of us own a marimba. So it really is sort of a combination. I guess what I would say about that, and this is maybe I'll say two things about it. One sort of focused on percussionists and percussionists who are watching this, that in most areas of the country, in most markets that you end up in, if you want to be able to freelance, you're going to have your own gear. And there are a few markets that are different, where you can rely well on rentals in backline, but in most markets in this country, you do have to have your own gear, and that's something that you should start considering investing in sooner rather than later, because more often than not, I see people get into a situation where they get out of school and have a ton of chops and are ready to go, but they actually don't have the resources to take the gigs that they should be taking. So it's amazing, right? If you buy a pair of bongos or a set of congas or something, and not a really expensive set, but just introductory set, and you do one gig with it, and it pays for itself, and then it just allows you to do more gigs and do more repertoire, and so as percussionists, while we do have to have access to a lot of instruments, and that can be a little bit overwhelming. It's not just one instrument, but it's thousands of instruments. That being said, a lot of them actually aren't too terribly expensive, especially if you were to compare yourself to, say, a violinist who has to take out a loan, like buying a house, to buy a violin, and then they also have to buy the bow, which costs about as much as a marimba. So that's something to think about for percussionists specifically, and then for anybody else, as you're looking at your organization. We not only does Third Coast pay for instruments, we actually budget for instruments, and we can maybe talk a little bit more about budgeting later this evening if that's of interest for anybody. But every single year we have a certain amount of money that we budget to be able to spend on instruments, and some of that is project specific, some of that is maintenance on the instruments. Like this past year we did a lot of tuning on our keyboard percussion instruments, and then we also have just sort of a slush fund there, because we're always buying stuff. We're percussionists.
Colin has even built us stuff too.
That's true, actually. Yeah, and then we build stuff too. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a lot. This is our rehearsal space that you see right here, and we never have less stuff, and we never have more space. And
true.
it's an awkward balance that we have here, and that's just again part of being a percussionist.
This is a good time to plug some new content that you'll see from Third Coast under the umbrella called Digital TCP. Within the last few weeks, we haven't been able to play live concerts, so we've made a lot of content online. And one of them is going to be a tour of our studio. So subscribe to us on all the things, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, and you'll see one of those come up. We did actually not answer the second half of Drew's question. I'm sorry.
Oh, we didn't. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, which is about any misconceptions that people might have about percussionists, but specifically music teachers. And one of mine is I personally think it's really challenging to be, for example, a wind ensemble director in a really happening program, because there's these pieces that really push the winds and the brass, and there's nothing for the percussionists to do, and they're back there, they're doing their homework, they're throwing pencils into the ceiling, they're shoving things into the concert bass drum. And I think it's really challenging, and I think, but I would say it's an opportunity for those directors to really push percussionists, because we are up for so much. We're a chamber group, and we're just percussionists. So maybe if you're doing Lincolnshire Posey with your band, send the percussionists off to learn a quartet together. I think that would be really cool. Another thing is a misconception is that percussionists don't attend to harmony or melody in the same way. And so, during all of your warm-ups, please have us play mallet instruments or sing our parts. They probably won't like it, but you should make all your percussionists sing. Yeah, those are a few, I think, common music educator misconceptions.
I think there's just sort of stereotypes that every instrumentalist get. Like the idea that all percussionists have great time, which is actually totally not true. Not true at all.
It's on the other side, like people call out singers for not having a good time, but there are some singers that have amazing time, or that's
exactly.
It's all bell curve stuff.
And then the idea, like intonation, or your sort of affinity towards like intonation, and actually, granted, like a lot of instruments, we don't have the ability, to manipulate intonation, but some we do, like timpani. And like if you, and that's a really, really important instrument in every orchestra. And like the timpanist, some of the best ears on people that I've ever seen have been professional timpanists.
You want to answer one more question, Pete, and then maybe we'll
sure.
kick it to
Yeah.
the video?
Sorry. Let me flip down the list here. Wait for it. Wait for it. We'll get there. Dana asks,
yeah.
There we go. How do you put yourself in a performance mindset when you cannot see your audience in front of you? Wow. We should talk about this because this is a good thing. I've been reflecting on this personally a little bit, talking with my wife at home about it because and even actually this experience right here is somewhat odd. I'm having a long conversation with people. I have no idea who you are, what you look like even. It's even more odd than being in a Zoom meeting because I'm literally just talking to a camera, and from that camera I'm actually seeing a reflection of myself talking. So
I love the chats. That's how I get into it. It's like seeing people sign in from all over the world.
Yeah.
I got really nervous the other day. The first time we tried to do a live stream from this studio, I got really nervous. We were playing stuff that we played all the time, but there was people listening from New Zealand and Spain, and it was making art in real time, which is so special about music and dance and the performative arts. And I got nervous and excited because we were reaching audience that we had never reached before.
I would say it's a type of like performance adrenaline that's a really unique blend of like doing a live concert on a stage, which has a certain energy to it, but also being in a recording studio. And if any of you have ever been sort of in that type of environment, that's a unique type of like sort of intensity where it's a different type of pressure that you're doing because you're looking at doing something like absolutely perfectly because you feel like you're under a microscope, but I guess so you have that sort of sense when we're doing these live streaming concerts that you are somewhat under a microscope, and it kind of feels the same way. It's a very cold, there is no audience like in front of you, so you don't have that interaction, you don't have that experience, you don't have that response, and so it's a very weird blend. But I think it's I don't know. I think it's fun. Reflecting on it, I enjoy it. It's definitely. I remember the first live stream that we did. This was very soon after this pandemic, sort of began, and things started getting canceled, and we worked very quickly to be able to set up shop and be able to do it. And I remember the first one that we did. It was actually just a real big relief because there was so much anxiety going on, both personally, as well as with my ensemble, as well with Unistar colleagues and our community of musicians. There's just so much anxiety going on about what is going to happen with performance, and to be able to do that performance, I think meant a lot to me personally. So
it's nice to just have an event.
Yeah, and I think some of the response that we've been having has been interesting in just that way. That a lot of people have reached out saying how meaningful it is for them to just have an event to kind of tune into,
And now all of you have an event every night, Monday through Thursday at 8 p.m. through Keeping the Beat. So thanks again to UT Martin and TNME, the Tennessee Music Educators Association, TNMEA. Gosh, I'm not good with acronyms. And the Country Music Association Foundation for supporting us. We're going to shift gears. We'll say goodbye to Team Plaid Shirt for now. We're going to play a video that talks about how we divide up responsibilities in our group. So we'll be right back with you with some more Q&A after this short video.
TCP.
F. A. Q.
Hi, this is David Skidmore. I'm the Executive Director of Third Coast Percussion. I primarily think about the future, and I try and think about how every little thing that Third Coast Percussion does works towards a common goal that we've all decided on together. On a day-to-day basis, the main things that I do involve liaising with our board of directors. We have 16 people on our board of directors for Third Coast Percussion, and they help steer the direction of the organization. and I also am the ensemble member who liaises with the concert presenters who hire us to play concerts.
Hi, my name is Reba Caffarelli, and I'm Third Coast Percussion's Managing Director. My primary responsibility is to communicate with the wider performing arts world about the ensemble's dynamic, performance, and education activities. I'm constantly in contact with presenters, educators, and universities all over the world, talking about Third Coast Percussion's programming and finding out what would be the best fit for their audiences and communities. I take care of contracting and other administrative work that helps to set the ensemble up for success no matter where their travels are taking them.
Hey, I'm Rob. I'm our development director. Third Coast Percussion is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization. We are eligible to receive tax-deductible donations from individuals, and we're also eligible to apply for grant funds. My role has been to apply for those grants, do the grant writing, also to build relationships with donors, plan fundraising events, and other fundraising initiatives throughout the year. I started as our development director, I would say, because I'm a pretty good writer for grant writing purposes, and I'm reasonably likable for building relationships with donors.
My name's Rebecca, and I'm TCP's Office Manager and Development Associate. I write grants, communicate with donors, and plan fundraising events to raise money and support for TCP. I handle social media and email marketing, and I help out in small ways with just about every other part of the organization. Anything anyone puts on my desk, I do. And I'm also a percussionist, so I really enjoy listening to rehearsals through the office wall.
I'm the finance director for Third Coast Percussion. I do all the bookkeeping for the group. I also take care of fun stuff like payroll and benefits, filings, 1099s, you name it. I manage our budgets for each fiscal year, and I take care of all the financial reporting we have to do with our board of directors, with outside grant-making organizations, really anybody who's asking about our financials. I'm one of those people that I guess gets a certain amount of satisfaction from reconciling QB accounts at the end of each month. As a 501c3 charitable organization, we're required by law to be audited each year, and so I take care of all of the reporting and documentation, working with the outside auditing agency. It's really a special type of party that I look forward to every year. Not a CPA. I landed this gig for no other reason than I was the person that set up TCP's first bank account.
Oh, hi there. I'm Colin Campbell, studio manager at Third Coast Percussion. As studio manager, I'm involved with a lot of the production-related aspects of what Third Coast does on stage and online. I work really closely with ensemble member Sean Connors to help him with advancing shows, sending out stage plots, lighting plots. I pack a lot of our instruments when they're getting ready to go on tour. I do some carpentry or some woodworking to make custom instruments for the ensemble when that's needed. Editing a lot of our online content, and also producing all of our live streams.
Hi, I'm Sean, and I'm TCP's Technical Director. I oversee all things related to production and logistics. I send tech writers and stage plots to venues. I deal with travel. I oversee everything having to do with the instruments that Third Coast Percussion uses for all of our concerts.
Hi, everyone. If you're just joining us, this is Third Coast Percussion here as part of Keeping the Beat, hosted by UT Martin and the Tennessee Music Educators Association. Thanks for being here with us. We are going to take a few more questions, but what the video you were just watching was talking about our administrative roles within the group. So basically how we divide up the business of running Third Coast Percussion. And I was going to expand a little bit on my role as it pertains to the moment in time that we're in right now, because I thought that might be interesting. Basically, the thing that I think about all the time, that I try and think about all the time, is big picture stuff. So I'm David. I'm the executive director. I basically think about us getting hired on the one hand, and big picture stuff on the other hand. Those are the two main things that I think about. So the main thing that I'm focused on right now as part of my role is how Third Coast Percussion is creating something positive in this time when so much that's going on is really negative, and how we can get to the the other side of this pretty horrible time in our history. And when we're on that other side, have Third Coast be at a position where we can be healthy, both physically and as an organization, and kind of ready to get back to business as usual. So I work very closely with our board of directors. As a not-for-profit organization, we have a board of directors. Our board has 16 people on it. Rob is the only ensemble member on it. Everyone else is a professional who has some connection to music, either as a fan or perhaps working for some musical organization, but primarily are just people who believe in our organization and have something to offer in terms of expertise and other ways of supporting the organization. So I'm spending a lot of time talking in particular to our board president, a woman named Sarah Cafu. And Sarah is, like the rest of the board, just providing us advice and guidance. We don't know anything about navigating this current situation. It seems as though actually no one does. But there are people on our board who have amazing experience in other areas that pertain to things that are happening now. Like, for instance, when you're running a business and you have a sudden change in the way that your business makes money, how do you deal with that kind of change? Those are the things that I am spending a lot of time on, and I'm continuing to play the role of the person in the ensemble who talks to people who hire groups like ours. So we have relationships with a ton of different concert presenters and people who run festivals and stuff like that all over the country and all over the world now. I spend a lot of the day talking to those people, and they're frankly, in many cases, as sort of dumbfounded as we are in terms of how to operate as an artistic organization whose main purpose is getting performance in front of people that are grouped together when it is not safe for people to be grouped together. So I won't lie, it's a very stressful time, but it's also, when you take a step back, a very interesting time as well. Pete, did you want to talk a little bit about your stresses?
I mean, again, I think talking about the present is maybe a really good way to address all of our roles right now. And so I would maybe just say like a couple things about what I'm working on right now and actually how I spend most of my day today. So I'm the finance director, as you saw in that video. So and I do so many things that are involved with sort of our financials. And right now I'm very much involved in putting together and maintaining cash flow forecasts. And that sort of takes our larger annual budget, sort of year-long budget, and rather than just looking at it in the bird's eye view, of like how things will happen over the course of a year, the cash flow budgets or forecasts that we look at are looking at how things are happening over from month to month, and in some cases even more narrow than that. And at this time, just because so many things are changing, because of the situation that we're in, they're changing on a daily basis, and so we're getting more visibility on what's being canceled or what opportunities are opening up based on our income and expenses. And we're learning about those opportunities, and we're learning about what is committed, on a daily basis. So so making sure that all of that information is really up to date and reconciled with all their other financial statements, and done in a way too that's sort of easy to digest. So when we have people like these sort of volunteers, like the board of directors that Dave was saying, who come with a lot of expertise and a lot of experience, so they can look at some of these financial statements and really make some important decisions and help us out in a way. So I've been heavily involved in that recently, as well as now thinking about our upcoming fiscal year and for us and for many arts organizations, our fiscal years are not a calendar year or don't follow the normal calendar year like you would in your own personal finances, but we actually follow a fiscal year that goes from July 1 to June 30th, which follows our performance calendar or seasonal calendar. And a lot of arts organizations operate under that type of fiscal year. So we're in a position right now where under normal circumstances, we would be approving a budget for the next fiscal year in the upcoming months. And up until a couple weeks ago, I'd been working with my treasurer on putting together a budget that was based on all the stuff we had planned. And now with like the current situation, a lot of things are sort of changing, and we don't have as much visibility through the summer and even into like the fall. And again, just trying to think a little bit more conservatively than we ever have been has been interesting and has been occupying a lot of my time as well. And I think the last one is something that's been very, very interesting. And I'm not sure how many of you as students are sort of dealing with this, but responding to new legislation that's coming from the federal government, and more particularly like the CARES Act that was passed very recently. And with that comes some emergency funding to help small businesses. And so looking into all of those opportunities and making sure that Third Coast as an organization is taking advantage of as many of these opportunities as possible. So it's a really, like Dave said, I wouldn't call it something that I'm really excited about, but that being said, it's a very interesting time, and I try to be positive about all of it, and I keep saying that we will see this other side of this thing, and we will see the other side of this thing. When we get to that other side, it'll be an interesting time for us to reflect, and a lot of arts organizations like ours to reflect on certain things like budgets and finances, and how to prepare more in the future for situations like these that nobody would have guessed that we would be in this situation now a year ago or even a month ago.
Sure. So maybe now we'll pivot to taking a few more questions, and then Rob and Sean could maybe, if it feels like something you guys want to do, expand on your roles a little bit later. But let's see. Edward F. asks, when we do an original composition for the group, is it credited to the group or the actual composer or composers within the group? And do we self-publish, or are we affiliated with a publisher?
Say that one more time for me.
No worries. I can do it because there's a lot of parts to it. Yeah. So we do all, the four of us, each compose music. And the question about who gets credit for it depends on the project. So, for instance, there are times when Peter just says, guys, I wrote a piece. Will you play it? And we'll play it, and that is undeniably Peter's piece. Every single piece of music we play, it doesn't matter who composes it, is a collaborative effort, at least in my view. If we very, very rarely find ourselves, or even try to allow ourselves to be in a position where someone writes a piece of music. They don't talk to us at all. They don't have any conversation with us at all. And the music just shows up and we play it. Because in our experience, I think this is in some ways particular to being a percussion group, but I think it could be true of any group. That just doesn't necessarily lead to the best results. So we ask any composer who's working with us to collaborate with us as much as they are comfortable doing so. It doesn't matter if they have never written a piece for Percussion Quartet or if they've written 100 pieces for Percussion Quartet. We want our piece to be very specific to us. And all of that is a long way of saying that even when Peter brings us a piece, or when I write a piece and bring it to the group, things change, That's the amazing thing about us writing for each other, is that we're in the room. First of all, we know each other so well. So, going into writing the piece, there's things that we can take advantage of. But once we're in the room playing the piece, we know each other really, really well, and we're very respectful, but also really honest with each other. And we can say, what if we tried this instead? What if we tried that instead? That sort of thing. But a piece that starts with one of us is credited to one of us. There are projects that we have done where the four of us co-compose music. We've done that a couple of different ways. Basically what it means is that we come up with a way that there's a shared kind of pool of material, thematic material maybe, or maybe it's other music that we're drawing inspiration from. And so we're all kind of coming at the piece from the same angle. And we divide up the piece into sort of 4 parts, however that makes sense with the piece. But the way that'll work is one of us will write essentially a first draft of something, and the others will offer feedback. And usually someone will raise their hand and say, I'd like to take a crack at this, and they'll do a second draft of it, and so on and so forth until the piece is done. In those cases, those pieces are credited to Third Coast Percussion. So a good example is an album we put out called Paddle to the Sea. About half of the music on that album, the part that is the piece called Paddle to the Sea, was co-composed by the 4 of us. And we know internally kind of who took the lead on certain parts. And I think, if we're really honest, I think there's some parts that we were like, oh yeah, Pete pretty much wrote that, and and then I added like a drum fill or something, whatever. But there are definitely parts where, at least for me, I listen and I'm like, I don't even remember where this came from, which is a kind of a cool and special thing. We do self-publish all of our music, and I'll get on a minor soapbox about this because we've been able to work with Philip Glass a number of times over the past few years. He wrote us a new piece, and we've gotten a chance to hang out with him a couple times. And Phil says something that I'll say right now, which is that there's no reason, if you can be organized to some minimal degree, that you should allow someone else to own your music. That's something that I feel very strongly about. I don't know that I'm not speaking for the whole group here, but going with a publisher makes a lot of sense if you don't want to deal with any of the business aspect of things. You don't want to send your music to a printer and put it in an envelope and send it to someone, or you don't want to have a PDF that's copyright protected so that you can send to someone and they send you $20 for your piece. And there are people who really just don't want to deal with any aspect of that whatsoever. But the unfortunate thing that happens when when someone publishes your music is that they own it, often for the rest of eternity. So something that Philip says all the time is that is always never really set well with him. So Philip is an interesting, really outlier in the classical music world because he doesn't have a publisher. He owns all of his own music, and that's a decision that Third Coast Percussion has made as well. If anyone's interested in that, in like what it means to self-publish, we're happy to talk more about that as well. You can drop a question in the comments, or you can also, of course, contact us after this as well for any questions we don't have time to address. Can I kick a question to you, Pete?
Sure, absolutely.
All right. Nick M. asks, what do you think makes you guys stand out as a professional ensemble?
That's interesting. Okay,
Strong feelings about publishing.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think so. So there's a lot of ways I could interpret this question. Like there's one like what makes us stand out artistically, as an ensemble. But maybe one of like the words that you used stand out as like a professional ensemble. And I'm also just thinking about what Dave was just saying, thinking of a professional organization. So maybe I'm interpreting the question as like, what makes you successful as a professional ensemble or a professional organization? And so I'm going to answer it that way. And what I would say is that, and this is again bringing back a lot of stuff that we have been talking about, our ability to be successful has been based on the fact that, well, one, we are able to perform at the highest level, or is high enough level that people appreciate our performances, and we always bring the most amount of sort of artistic rigor to everything that we do and every project that we do, both in performance and planning and whatnot. But I think in addition to that, one of the reasons that we've been successful is that we've also been able to bring that same amount of rigor and that same amount of passion and intensity to all the other jobs that we do as an organization. And we are an artist-run organization. We've been talking a lot about all these other administrative roles. We've been talking about self-publishing. We've been talking about all these things. And again, we being artist-run and being able to wear many hats and being able to perform all of those other jobs at a very high level. So not just doing it because somebody needs to do it, but really taking ownership of it is one of the reasons that we've been successful. It's one of the reasons we've got to where we are right now, because years ago, when we realized that those jobs needed to be done, we didn't use our money to contract it out to somebody else. We decided to do it ourselves, and that in turn allowed us to not only understand a little bit more about the backside of things, but also allowed us to pay ourselves to do that rather than paying somebody else. And so this is very much similar to what Dave was talking about, self-publishing, paying yourself for your for your work rather than paying somebody else to do that work for you. It doesn't mean that we do every single thing. We do contract out stuff, and there are some people that are just way more qualified to do certain things, and I totally understand that. And it does reach a point where, none of us can design a website really well, or we're not going to do that. So we do contract stuff like that out. But we always have a hand in everything that's going on. And I think that is really, really important in today's economy and in today's market. Do you have anything to add, Dave? You're the one that sells us on stuff like this. Like, what makes us stand out? So, yeah.
I would say everything. I would echo everything that Peter just said, and I also something that I talk about when I'm speaking to someone who might hire us to play a concert. A couple things that I say. One, this is our full-time job, and this is the only thing that we do. Each of us kind of takes like one sort of other gig a year, but we're unspeakably busy in this group with the rehearsals that we're doing, the concerts that we're doing, and the administrative work that we have to do to make it happen. But that means that, almost every single day of the year, we're making music together, or we're talking about making music together. There are some other groups that can say that, but not every group can say that. And I do think that makes us stand out because we just know each other so well as musicians and as people, and I think that comes across on stage. And then one other thing that I think it isn't entirely unique to us, but I think it's something that distinguishes us in some regard, is that when we're looking for people to collaborate with, we're not starting with only the most sort of obvious collaborators, I guess, is probably the best way I could think of to say that right now. In other words, we ask people to write music for us, for instance, who have gone and studied conservatory composition. Maybe they started in high school, they got an undergraduate degree in composition, a master's degree in composition, a terminal degree in composition. They've made their whole living composing music. There's amazing artists out there that inspire us that we ask to write music. There's also people who have absolutely no formal training in music who we've asked to write us pieces of music. And that's because they've written other music that we think is fantastic. So we take a very sort of non-Catholic, that's Catholic with a little c, not a big C, approach to what it means to be a composer and a music maker. And I think that makes our projects unique, and it's one of the things that I'm proud of in terms of what we do. Let's see, another question. Mary E asks, with Third Coast Percussion being your full-time job, what does your typical work week look like compared to an office or teaching or, quote, normal job?
That's interesting. Yeah, it does fluctuate a lot. It fluctuates the most when we're on tour. And every day on tour is different, although we are oftentimes doing similar things in these different locations. But that's when we have the most sort of like fluctuation, and every day is different. And sometimes you're waking up really early in the morning to do an educational show at a K through 12 school somewhere. Other days you're spending most of the day teching and doing a dress rehearsal for a concert in a venue, and then doing a concert that evening. And then other days, you're doing master classes for people studying to be professional musicians, like some of you. And so. But those schedules are always, all over the map, and so every day is different. And when we're at home, though, we try to be as organized as possible. Or when we're at home, we try to keep our schedule as regular as possible. And I say that with a grain of salt because every single week at home is different. And certainly right now, things have become very, very different. But in a normal work week at home in Chicago, Third Coast Percussion spends Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Here in our studio and our office, which is next door. And we spend that time together. And it's the 4 of us here, as well as our 3 full-time staff members. And so all of our rehearsals that happen, as well as other business and artistic meetings that would need to happen, they all happen during that 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. time. Personal practice happens outside of that time, just by necessity. And of course, we do a lot of work outside of those times individually as well. But 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. is the time when every single person who is involved with this organization as an employee is here together and here in the same space together. And that was something that we started doing right when we decided to make it a full-time job. When we quit all of our day gigs, this is about 9 years ago, something like that, quit all of our day gigs and decided to go all in on this, and we decided that we were going to do it as a full-time job, which meant that we weren't allowed to take, well, it's not that we weren't allowed, but just meant that we didn't have the opportunity to take other gigs, like Dave was mentioning, because if that gig happened to have rehearsals that were in that 10 to 6 window, we just couldn't do it. And we continue to this day. And that type of model is very unique. And Dave alluded to this too in his last question, of the idea that this is all we do. It's our full-time job as a chamber ensemble. Not a lot of professional chamber ensembles only do this or only do that one thing. But that's something that we do, and what we found as a result of that is that our capacity exploded because we were focused exclusively on this, and all 4 of us were focused exclusively on Third Coast Percussion. And now we have 3 other people, so we have 7 people that are focused exclusively on Third Coast Percussion.
Yeah, I'll just add, in case you've tuned in recently, Peter was describing our normal work week. Obviously, that has changed drastically.
Yes.
So now the 4 of us, the 7 of us in the organization, that's the 4 ensemble members, and our 3 full-time staff members are all working from home. And we have come into the studio, I think this is the 3rd time in the last few weeks, all of us together, because we have to be in the same room for this. But otherwise, we've been at home, so it's been a new challenge. I've got a toddler at home that I look after all day long while I'm trying to work, which is really fun. Yeah, it is. It's really fun. It's also stressful. Jerry E. asks, let's do one more question, and then
why don't you field this one too?
Okay, great. Okay, so Jerry E. asks, how many of your own instruments do you guys take on tour? I imagine smaller instruments aren't as big of an issue, but how much do you rely on larger instruments being provided by the host or venue? That's a great question. So we have found that you can find marimbas, drums, vibraphones, glockenspiels, even crotales. There's a few other large instruments that I could probably mention as well. Basically, almost anywhere in the world, anywhere that's ever hired us to play a gig. It's not always easy, but it is possible. So those instruments we ask for the person who's hosting us to play the concert to provide for us. And we travel with these large suitcases full of the smaller instruments that you allude to in your question. So there's all kinds of cool small instruments that Colin has built for us, or that we've collected just on our travels, or that just have a especially unique sound and are small enough to pack into a suitcase. And we bring those with us. And we've got a whole system worked out where because of a certain type of credit card that Third Coast pays for every year, we can have 2 bags at this point up to 70 pounds each, and so per person. So that means 8 giant 70-pound bags can come with us anywhere. Colin and Sean work together to make packing lists so that the same thing gets packed in the suitcase every time, so we know that they're going to be under that weight limit, so that we don't get charged extra. But that's our like go-to touring model. I will say that there are fun and ridiculous exceptions. Like, for instance, we did a concert in Juneau, Alaska. And if any of you have ever been to Juneau or know anything about Juneau, it's surrounded by mountains, so you can only fly there or take a boat there. And they had, I don't remember all the particulars, but there were just some hilarious stories about how we were going to get a marimba in Juneau. So there are these times where it's like, it's a more of a challenge, but and it's Sean who does an amazing job of communicating with these places where we're going, and figuring out where the instruments are going to come from. But we somehow always manage to make it work. Yeah. And maybe this is a good segue. I'm going to turn the mic over to Sean. I'm going to wipe it down with this disinfectant wipe right here. And I'm going to turn it over to Sean, who's going to talk about some of the educational projects that Third Coast Percussion does. So here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Sean Connors.
Team Pletcher, back together again. It's been so long. Thanks, Dave. Someone recently asked the question in the chat, what sets us apart, or I'm paraphrasing now. And I am really always pumped to talk about our educational efforts, because as a touring professional chamber group, we've spent just as much time thinking about our community engagement projects and our young persons concerts and our family concerts and all of our educational concerts and efforts as we do our former headlining concerts. And some things that we've thought about a lot and try to implement in all of our educational efforts are inclusion. So what I mean by that is anytime we play a concert for school kids, for example, we want to make sure that we include everyone in the audience. Sometimes that takes the form of playing a piece and having a musical game that everyone can clap to, dance to, sing to, do something kind of crazy and fun and silly together. But we've learned a lot from mentors of just particular aspects of how to do that. Creativity, was kind of talking about this before, but empowering young students to create something themselves and get over that barrier to writing a piece or doing an improvisation. And I'd like to just talk about a few programs that we do offer that I think make us pretty unique. So our go-to program is called Think Outside the Drum, and we do that for all ages. That's probably our most performed show in our history, actually. We've done it in Polish with translators, and that requires no tech. It's marimba, a few drums. We play classic literature like Third Construction, but they have this inclusive nature in it. So everyone sings in the audience, everyone claps, and everyone walks away with a basic go-to goal. Our goal in that is to teach them about some fundamentals of music, like melody and rhythm and timbre, and everyone will walk away, and we're confident that everyone in the room walks away and they know those things. So one tier up from that, we got very interested in marrying the STEM subjects, so science, technology, education, and engineering and mathematics, to the arts, in an acronym STEAM. With our friends at Notre Dame in the engineering department there, we've created some programs that fuse the arts together with the STEM subjects, and we have some programs that deal with that. We have longer multiple visit programs where we build a composition together with a group of students. Oftentimes it's those students' first time ever writing a piece. And recently, we're really excited because we've thrown all of those ideas together and have created a project that is being piloted in Elkhart, Indiana right now, actually, called Making Waves. That's a kind of an allusion to sound waves. And it both teaches fundamentals of the STEM subjects and music. And we're really pumped about it. We want to share it with as many communities as we can. So we figured we'd show a little video now to you about what we're doing out in Elkhart and our partners there. So here's that video called Making Waves.
We're here at Pierre Moran Middle School to hear the first performance of a brand new piece composed by the students of Pierre Moran and the Roosevelt STEAM Academy on instruments that they built for this piece of music.
These are students with a variety of backgrounds, and some of them have never, touched a musical instrument before in their lives. So they were able to not only create the musical instrument that they were going to play, but then they actually had to learn how to play it just right on the spot. And then as soon as they learned how to play that musical instrument, they were able to create new and original musical content.
The goal of this project is to get students thinking about math and science in a new way, and also thinking about music in a new way. Sometimes students feel like music is a creative subject and math and science is an analytical subject. This project is all about teaching students that any subject is both analytical and creative.
Third Coast Percussion is a Grammy award-winning group. They play percussion instruments and they do lots of musical outreach in the community, and they're an amazing group of musicians. I am absolutely excited for the students to be performing with Third Coast Percussion, and I think it's going to go very, very well. I think we're ready to roll.
My favorite part of this theme class is getting to compose our own music and doing it with our own instruments that we built on our own. It was really fun to do.
My favorite part of the theme class is actually getting together with a bunch of people and experience making music, building instruments, and doing math and engineering with all of us together.
Building stuff and playing stuff is fun, but really just doing it with your friends is it's my favorite part. Just getting to do it with your friends, because then you learn together.
It's going to be amazing. We have the Roosevelt kids who have practiced, we've practiced, and we are adding Third Coast Percussion in with it. So I feel like tonight it's just going to be great because we have everybody coming to see us, and it's just going to be so much fun.
We all remember going to school. We all remember our math classes and our science classes, and we don't remember creativity being a major focus of those classes. And if we can bring a little bit of that creativity into the classroom, it brings us a lot of fulfillment to see the students happy, having a good time, and learning a lot of really important information and being creative at the same time.
Oftentimes school is so scripted that there's one right answer and the emphasis is on trying to get the right answer. Here there's no right answer. It's just sort of what works and what does everybody come up with. And I think that's a real different thing for both students and teachers, and I'd like to see more of that.
As we grow and as we expand, we realize that these programs are so successful that we're trying to scale them up. We're trying to scale them up so that we would be able to offer these programs all over the country, not necessarily being facilitated by members of Third Coast Percussion, but actually being facilitated by different educators.
If this would have happened back when I was in this age group, it would have opened up a door for music that I never got to experience.
For an autistic teenage boy, he just stood there and perfectly articulated to strangers, conversed with strangers, and smiling and explaining it and looking them in the eye. That's huge.
It's creating an experience, and it's creating a memory, and so in creating experience and memories, those are what we take with us for the rest of our lives, and this was on the positive side. And some people's going to take this and it's going to stick with them for the rest of their life.
And I'm blown away by this. This is amazing. And I love you guys so much for this.
So that was a short video about one of our educational programs that we're really excited about, and then we're working on that to flesh it out and make it more robust for the future and bring it to communities around the nation. So if you're just tuning in, we're Third Coast Percussion. My name is Sean. This is Rob. This is Peter and David. And we're really excited to be here tonight on Keeping the Beat. Thank you so much for your support, the Country Music Association Foundation, TNMEA, and of course UT Martin. We've been taking questions all night in the chat, so please feel free to put them in the scrolling chat wherever it is on your screen. And Rob, do you have a question for us?
Yes. So we have Jerry T asks, what does our audience consist of? Musicians, regular people, or students? I think the one common factor among our audience is maybe just a sense of curiosity. I think one of the great things about being I think all of you out there who are percussionists or who have an interest maybe in contemporary music, is that there's just I think there's not such a clearly defined audience already waiting for what we do, and I think we sort of combine people from a lot of different places and backgrounds to form an audience together. And I think maybe that the sort of different series and different places that we play speak to that a little bit. So a lot of times we'll play on classical music series, and we get to perform for a classical music audience. And in a lot of cases, that might be an audience that has never heard a percussion ensemble concert before, and they might have some ideas about what they're going to see, and maybe we'll surprise them with some different things. Sometimes we play on festivals that also include, let's say, rock musicians or indie musicians or folks who are crossing over between a lot of different genres. And I think we wind up with a lot of younger audiences in that case, and folks just have an open mind and are curious about something different. Some of the collaborations we do bring us in touch with different audiences. So we've done work with dance companies. We've done some collaborations with architects or engineers and all these different things. And I think those each help us tap into different audiences too. And I think also, anyone who ever played drums or played percussion automatically sort of become part of our audience. And I think the educational activities that we do also, each have their sort of audience as well. So it gives us a chance to connect with students of all ages. I think inevitably many of our most passionate fans are percussionists or percussion students. But I think one of the things that we really love is that we've helped to build an audience for this kind of music outside of the academic world too, which is really fun.
And our moms.
And of course, the moms. The moms love us. Sean, maybe you want to field this one.
Sure. From EVS.
Yeah.
This question is, how long does it take for you to practice and then record albums? That's a great question. And we've tried to streamline this, actually, and within the last few years. We were noticing that we would tour music, and we wouldn't have an album of what we were playing ready to offer at these concerts for our audiences to take home with them. So we've been making concerted efforts in the past few years to time a project being built and then recorded and then toured. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But a good example is an album that isn't released yet that we've put into the can. We have a collaborative program with two amazing musicians, Clarice and Sergio Assad. Unfortunately, we haven't gotten to play the latest concerts in that tour because of the crisis that's going on. But we've recorded that album, and it will be released hopefully, and when we come to your community and play that concert. So there's a little bit of calculus that we have to do. We have to kind of plan it out. To really answer the question about how long it takes to practice, it depends on the particular piece and the particular project. Some pieces naturally evolve, like the ones that we compose ourselves or co-compose. There's learning the piece while you're doing it too, and you're playing in the parts and you're trying things out, and so building the project is part of practicing it. That was the case with this past project with the Assads, but yeah. Do you have anything to add to that, Rob? Or?
No, I think every project is different, and a lot of times we don't necessarily record all of the music that we play. I think each year, at least once a year, we're putting out an album, and usually that's one of our big projects for the year, or combines some of our big repertoire for that season. But we're not like the sort of band that just has our album, we tour that album, and then mix in repertoire maybe from our previous albums. We play probably somewhere in the neighborhood of like 40 to 50 different pieces in a season every year. And a lot of times those will be things that we've recorded and played a lot, but there are always just some other special repertoire pieces that are maybe for specific situations, specific concert, or our repertoire that we didn't ever feel like fit well on a recording, but it was something that we've maintained in our live repertoire for other reasons.
Great. Here's another question. Chelsea asks, how do you ensure accountability of all members' administrative roles? And then part 2, how do you balance the rehearsing and performing with these other duties?
Yeah, this is a tricky one. I think the balance between performing and administrative duties is something that we are constantly struggling with, honestly. I mean, I think we all work really hard to be the best musicians that we can be, but also keep up with all the administrative work, and there is it feels like there's no end to either one. I think scheduling time for things is something that's really helped. Peter mentioned earlier that we keep a really regular schedule, usually under more normal circumstances. When we're in Chicago, we usually keep a 10 to 6 Monday to Friday schedule, and that time is usually pretty scheduled in detail. So there are rehearsals at certain times that are on the calendar for weeks ahead of time. There are meetings that are on the calendar for certain times. And I think making sure that we're doing some playing and reserving time for certain administrative decisions every day helps us to sort of keep up with both of those things. But it's always a challenge, and I think each of us sort of finds our own ways to schedule our time, to mark things in our own calendars and reserve time for personal practice or for whatever else, or for making time for certain administrative tasks that just have to get done or that are really important to the organization. I think being proactive in taking care of the most important things that are part of your role for the organization, and not just getting caught up in responding to all of the latest emails that have come in while you have been sending your last email. It's tough, but I think something that we've probably all gotten better at over time is figuring out how to set aside the time to not just respond to things, but to always prioritize the most important things that are part of our role. Sean, do you have any thoughts about that, and especially about accountability?
Yeah. Well, first I'll make a blatant plug to subscribe to our YouTube channel, because Peter actually made a really lovely video that kind of delves into that even more detail. We're going to be putting out a couple of videos that answer questions like these, some master classes, and also just some fun things over the course of the next few weeks, because we can't play live concerts. So that's under the umbrella of Digital TCP. Check that out. But in terms of the accountability thing, I'll answer that with just this feeling that I've had, honestly, just with this past month, because it's been really challenging and frightening for a lot of us, probably all of us, I'd imagine.
Yeah,
it's been pretty darn frightening. And the feeling that I got, more so, the most visceral feeling that I felt is that we're a team right now, and that everyone, all 7 of us, are doing everything they can to make sure that we're still doing our mission. We're still going. We kind of batten down the hatches and are in it together. And I think there's something to be said to the core philosophy of what the group is designed around, and the sort of team members that it attracts because of that. So there's a little bit of an inherent mix of all of our personalities, and I think we probably lean towards being workaholics a little bit, but we attract other people who take take pride in their work and really care about the mission, really care about new amazing percussion music, really care about arts education, really care about connecting with audiences. And I think we've built a team. I'm waxing a little bit. But I do think it comes down to the philosophy that we have. And
yeah, and I think, communication among the ensemble really helps. I think there's very few super important things that only one person is working on completely on their own. So if there's something really important that someone has to work on, they're usually at least in touch with one or a bunch of folks within the organization about that over time, so that there's opportunities for regular check-ins and sort of smaller steps along the way towards bigger goals. Also, we mentioned a little bit earlier, we have a board of directors, and a big part of the board's role for us also is accountability of asking us the questions of how things are operating, how things could be done better, if we're overlooking or forgetting some things that might help us as an organization. And, we meet with our full board quarterly, but we also have board committees that help us to address specific challenges that we're dealing with or specific opportunities or goals that we have. And those often will meet more regularly. And I know for myself, because I'm development guy, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about, Sean and I can expand a little bit more about some of our administrative tasks as well. I have a development committee made up of a bunch of board members and myself and Rebecca from our staff team. And that committee usually meets about once a month or so. And every time there's one of those meetings come up, that's a good reminder to me to make sure that I've done all the things that I was supposed to do towards our development goals. So, yeah, maybe Sean, the other guys talked a little bit more, sort of elaborating on their administrative roles in the context of current events, current circumstances.
Sure.
Maybe you and I can each talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, that's great. So, Colin Campbell, the studio manager for Third Coast Percussion, and myself, I'm the technical director. So we kind of make up the production wing of Third Coast Percussion. And usually that's dedicated towards producing in-person concerts. And very, very, very quickly, the circumstances and the model changed, and because of all the communication that Rob was alluding to, that is already part of our team, and the trust that everyone was going to deal with their area of the administration, Colin and I have gone kind of full head into producing online content and figuring out how to stream. So during our last in-person concert in Schaumburg, this just a few weeks ago, it seems like it was the 13th, it feels like a year ago, Colin had just essentially sat in the dressing room the entire time and figured out how to stream. He taught himself software. He's made a really lovely video that's up online. You can watch right now under TCP FAQ about the rig that he's operating this off of right now. It was all of stuff that we owned already. I think we only purchased 1 or 2 cords. Is that right, Colin? Yeah, we only purchased 1 or 2 cords, and the whole team really pitched in. I know Dave did a lot of research, and Colin did all sorts of research, and it's been about pivoting, honestly. It's been about keeping our vision statement and our mission in the front of our minds, and just looking at the cards that were dealt during this particular circumstances, and trying to pivot and still meet that mission and meet that goal. So we've been really focused on digital stuff. So that's why I've been saying digital TCP the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I think flexibility has been has really been a strength of our organization in this particular circumstance in particular, but it's something that's nice about being still a small organization, 7 full-time employees, is that we can change very quickly to adapt to different circumstances in a way that larger organizations have a harder time doing. It takes longer to steer a big ship in that way. And that especially happens for us because everyone's just really working very hard and working on things together. But the flexibility of it, it means, at the end of the day, it means that we're the ones responsible for doing the work, but it also means that we're the ones who have control over the outcome in a greater way than we might have in a larger organization.
We actually have a little theme that we say all the time in the group, and it proves true, especially during the last month. But our mantra kind of is make a plan and be flexible. Yeah. So we try to plan as much as we can, but then
it's like plans change every 2 to 3 days.
Yeah, on the hours, it seems like. Yeah.
Constantly evolving. So my administrative role, as I was mentioning in the video earlier, is I'm the development director. And so since we're a not-for-profit organization, we're supported in part by foundation grants and government support, as well as individual folks who donate money to us. And right now, what that means even more so, or it's different than under normal circumstances, is there's first off, there are certain emergency grants that are being made available through local foundations and government agencies. So sort of getting a sense of what that is and how to apply for that, and getting in our application for that as quickly as possible to help get some emergency support for our organization. Being in touch with all of the foundations that support us, just to update them about where we're at as an organization, what the challenges are we're facing right now, because this is new for everyone. Like the playbook is kind of out the window, and so all these foundations who want to support artists, they want to help artists get through these circumstances. They need to know, what do we need, what are our concerns right now, and how can they be of the most help. And then similar conversations happening with the individuals who donate to Third Coast. And so it's, us making our appeals to the folks who might support us and trying to raise money to make up for all of the canceled gigs, but also just building the relationships with the folks who've been really important supporters for us for a long time, and having the conversations so they understand what Third Coast is dealing with, and also what we're doing to deal with the situation, and how we're going to come out the other end of this strong, why we're still a good investment for people who believe in the art. But, I think one of the things that you don't necessarily think about when you're thinking about people who donate to arts, to support the arts. People donate to support the arts because they believe in the art, they love art, all of those things. But people who really are serious about supporting the arts, and foundations that are really serious about supporting the arts, big funders, they also support organizations because they believe that they know how to be successful, and that they are well managed, that they're well run, that they will adapt to circumstances, and that they will find ways to overcome their challenges. Because no matter how much someone might love the art that you're making, they're only going to invest so much money in it if they don't think that you're still going to be around in a year or two to do that. So anyhow, the whole development thing is about building relationships, really, especially relationships with individual people. And there are definitely relationships that we have been building over many years, folks who've been important to our organization, and we've just been really proactive about building relationships with, helping them understand why we're a great organization, why we're passionate about what we do, and making them feel appreciated for the support they give. Those people are more important than ever to our organization now, and when something that's like our circumstances now come up, you're really thankful for the time that you've spent with building those relationships and connecting with folks. So maybe we should dive into a couple more questions.
Yeah, let's take one more question here. Hoyen asks, how do you get inspiration for your compositions? I'll go first about our group compositions, the ones that we collaboratively compose. I think I stuck that landing.
Got it. Nailed it. Nailed it, John.
We usually put constraints on ourselves, so we'll either pair it to another media like dance or film. And so with Paddle to the Sea, the project that we talked about briefly before, there's a pre-existing film, so we had to compose within some constraints. We also picked music that would inspire our composition. And in that case, we chose music of Philip Glass, Jacob Druckmann, and traditional Shona music from Zimbabwe. And listened to that, made arrangements of that music, and then used that to fuel our own composition. So we try to, when we do group stuff, I think the most successful projects have been ones that don't just come in from nothing. It's not just like a black hole. We're like, I think I'll write a percussion quartet now. No, there's some constraints on it. There's a length to it. There's a theme that we have to write about or be inspired by, or there's particular collaborators that we're working with. The last, one of the last composition projects that we worked on was with Clarice Assad and Sergio Assad. Sergio is a guitarist, and Clarice is a multi-instrumentalist and vocalist. And this is the first time I've ever composed for a guitar. So I spent a lot of time just trying to figure some cool sounds out on guitar, and then use that to kind of inspire the small portion that I wrote.
Yeah, and for that project, it's a bunch of short movements, 5 minutes or so each, that are each based on different character types, and so the sort of personality of each of those, the character of it, I think served as inspiration for us in different ways. I know when I'm composing, I think probably a lot of people feel this way. Getting started is always the hardest part of something, is sort of figuring out where to begin, and the things that I think each of us maybe comes to a piece with one nugget of an idea, and then you just start writing. You just start making something, and usually once you start getting into the material, more things start revealing themselves. But starting is the hardest part. So for me, a lot of times when I'm writing a piece, maybe I'm thinking about a specific timbre or sound world, like a couple of instruments that I think sound cool or interesting together, and I want to experiment with that. Sometimes it's about maybe for some of the things we did collaboratively, we came up with just like really short little themes or nuggets or concepts that all of us could draw on and create variations on. I know the piece of David's that we played earlier, Torched and Wrecked, as part of a whole set of pieces where Dave was playing around with this idea of like having different, the same piece of music move at different speeds at the same time. And so maybe one person's part is built on a line that moves once every 4/16 notes, and someone else's is based on a line that's all groups of 3/16 notes, someone else's groups of 6, and then sort of developing different variations on that idea. And so I think we each find different things, but I think it's usually about finding like one nugget of an idea and then just start putting something on paper.
Great. We have a question from Julie Hill, our host, and this is a great question, and it leads me to make a plug, which I'm really excited about. Julie asks, there's a little bit of backstory here. I am lucky to have been part of several bands for many years. I am from a very rural background and was lucky to network in a pre-internet era, but was able to connect, make music, and form musical marriages with like-minded musicians. I work a lot with young international musicians who hope to create these same types of opportunities. They have internet and more access to resources than ever, but don't always have a more direct path to connect with those who have similar musical interests from outside their own communities or countries. Do you have any advice for these up-and-coming entrepreneurs who are isolated yet have the world at their fingertips if they knew who to reach out to? Rob, do you have anything that popped into your head there?
Wow, there's a lot there. I think one of the things actually that I often say, I think when we're just talking master classes in general for young musicians, is whatever the thing is that you're interested in doing, whatever the thing is you're most interested in doing, start doing it right away in kind of whatever way you can. I know, for me, I always liked writing music, and I did some of it in college, but I think I never really pursued it as ambitiously as I maybe should have early on, and I think I would have gotten better at it sooner if I just started doing it rather than maybe waiting or feeling like it was not the most important thing to do at that point. And I think maybe there's something in that for people who are in the situation that you're talking about, which is create something. Create whatever you can create with what you've got and put it out there. And the more you start putting something out there, I think more people will find, more like-minded people it'll make it easier to find like-minded people if there is something for people to see or something to listen to that's a representation of who you are as a musician and what you want to collaborate with people on.
Yeah, I would add to that, don't be afraid to reach out to people. We are in an awesome community. I think the arts community is amazing, and you can see that happening right now. We're all reaching out to each other, even though we can't be in person, and supporting each other and helping each other through this crisis. But we say this again when we're asked this question. This question can also be blown out and into a bigger question, kind of like, what is advice for someone going into a career in music? Kind of like a big. We get asked that question at the end of a lot of our sessions, actually. And one of the big ones that we land on a lot is ask for advice and don't be afraid to approach people. We've gained a lot from mentors, not only like formal mentors like our board and our advisory board, but people who were just doing stuff that we wanted to be doing, and they were 5 years down the road from us or 10 years down the road. Musicians in Chicago, musicians in the greater community on the national stage, just asking for advice and calling up. So here's my plug. If anyone is interested in what it takes to run or be in a small chamber ensemble like Third Coast Percussion, you can contact us. And specifically me, Sean Connors. Email me at sean@thirdcoastpercussion.com, and I can talk to you about internships that we have. We have had interns from all walks of life who have gone on to do lots of different things. Some are still in the arts, some are not. But they have actually made a little digital TCP video as well, which will be coming out soon, talking about their experience with us and learning what it takes to run essentially your own small business, but specifically in the arts. So don't be afraid to ask people for advice. Don't be afraid to tell people what your goals are. Well, first of all, you have to figure that out.
Yeah.
You have to know what you want. But then once you know, don't be afraid to ask. One of my favorite stories that Dave kind of tells this was probably 8 years ago, right, when Third Coast was becoming really, really busy. I wasn't in the group yet, but the 4 other guys were, and they had to make this decision about, can we become full-time or not? And they were seeking a ensemble and residency position. That was a big goal. That was a big strategic plan goal, because that could provide a foundation and support for quitting everything else and really focusing on Third Coast full-time. And Dave just started telling everybody that that's what we were working for and working towards, and was intelligent about it. He told people that would be interested, but did it in a way that was not pushy and just was honestly saying, like, here's what we're up to. So another way of saying that is always be able to say, what are you up to? What are you doing? Because you never know who you say things like that to, that it can help you in the future. Dave was on a panel was it CMA?
Yeah, it was for CMA at Arts Midwest.
He was on a panel, and someone asked him a question similar to this in similar circumstances, and he said, well, we're actively looking to become an ensemble in residence. And someone in the audience happened to be the person who eventually gave us our first ensemble in residence position. So that large-scale things like that happen, but small things happen as well. Just telling your friend that you're really interested in something, and then they meet someone, they're like, oh, I know who really likes that. Rob really likes that, and Third Coast Percussion is working towards that because he told me.
Yeah, and also I think it's important to remember that, as with so many things, sometimes these like the most important collaborations or relationships artistically, just like professionally, take time. They happen over a long period of time, and a lot of the concerts that we have played are for presenters who didn't hire us to play a concert the first time we ever talked to them. We talked to them for years, and they kept up eventually with what we were doing. They saw that we were doing good work and continuing to bring new projects, and after a while they said, you know what, I should really have you on my series. Likewise, there are grants that we applied for multiple times before we got it. There are individuals who we built, long-term relationships with before they ever, made a donation, kind of in any side of this. And artistically, too, there are folks who we sort of reached out to multiple times, made connections with, started a conversation, and then eventually, finally, there was like, okay, we're going to do a project together or commission you for a piece or whatever. But don't necessarily, like Sean said, you always want to make all of your interactions as positive and as friendly and human as you can. But sometimes people just need to get to know you over multiple interactions before it really turns into something. So don't be afraid to just, follow up with people and check back in from time to time and let them know what you're doing.
It also helps to, wherever you are, if you're feeling isolated, because that's kind of what was Julie's question, was talking about people who feel isolated. There's always stuff going on. If you dig around, it might not be in the exact place that you thought it was going to be. Maybe if you're a musician, maybe there's a really cool dancer in town doing something cool, or maybe there's a sculptor who's doing like performance art stuff, or you never know. Just go to stuff. Go to stuff wherever you are and support the arts, and be part of that community, because you never know who you're going to meet, what's going to happen, what you might go to a dance recital and be like, oh my gosh, this is inspiring me to do a dance collaboration or take dance class or write a new piece about it, and that might be the thing that gets you connected with a greater community.
Yeah, sometimes like the least likely collaboration is the thing that yields the greatest results too. So being open to what a collaboration could look like and who you might want to partner with for something, even if you don't know what it would actually look like when you get started, like being open to it and finding a good partner who wants to work through something with you can lead you to something really interesting and stretch you as an artist and as a person.
Well, this has been really fun. Thanks for having us. everyone. Thank you to the Country Music Association Foundation, to TNMEA, and to UT Martin. If you liked what you saw tonight and listened to, tune in weeknights, Monday through Thursday at 8 p.m. Central to watch Keeping the Beat live. Also, remember to tell your friends about this. This is an amazing program, and everyone can tune into it. So it feels like the perfect thing to be happening right now. Also, if you are interested in presenting and appearing on this program, please send applications to tnmea.org. And also just comment in the link below. So thanks from David and Peter and Rob and Sean, myself, and Colin, and Reba and Rebecca, who are in their own homes. Thanks for having us, Third Coast Percussion. Please check us out. We're putting out a lot of new content over the next few weeks, digital TCP. And thanks so much for watching. Have a great night.